Carl, great to talk with you. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
We're doing well.
Well, Carl, thank you.
Wish we could have more positive things to say about the New York Giants, and specifically, the defense, Carl, which is your bread and butter. The team is citing just not going out there and making the plays, I guess lack of execution. For the amount of talented players that they have on this defense, why aren't they executing?
Well, that's a good question. I think no one goes out and intends not to execute, right? But you have to be more intentional about your actions. And, the one thing that I've always shied away from was talking about how much a player makes, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of prefacing this by saying it's not about the money that you make, it's about the talent that you have. Because I think players, they're worth whatever, as much as a team is willing to pay them, they're worth that. But what I'm talking about is talent. I need you to play like they pay, because if they're paying you as a top free agent, defensive back, defensive lineman, wide receiver, whatever it is. And even if you're on this roster and you didn't come in over the last couple of years, play to your talent level. And that's why I say play like they pay, because they, again, you are deserving of all your money.
Of course.
We are deserving of all your effort.
Right.
Carl,
how do I'm saying?
Yeah. Do you think that's the high? Listen, it's a top-heavy roster to begin with, right? You got a lot invested in some high-paid guys, especially on the defense.
It's okay, but they're good. They're good players. They're talented players. We need that. Like your team needs that. Your team needs the best players to be good, and then the role players have to do their job. But your best players have to be good. That's your way out of this thing.
Yeah, I guess, Carl, it's hard, though, to envision, the pathway out of this because of the way that it is looked here through the first 5 weeks, getting set for the Rams on Sunday.
Well, my coach, Bill Parcells, would say there's always a path to victory if you're willing to do the things necessary. And I think the number one thing that they have to do is tackle better. They can tackle better, they'll have a better opportunity to win the game. I look at the Dallas game, and I didn't chart it, but I'm willing to bet there were at least 10 opportunities for tackles behind the line of scrimmage or at the line of scrimmage during the course of the Dallas game, where guys had first contact with a running back at the line of scrimmage or behind it, and that play resulted in 8 or 10-yard gains. So you give yourself a chance when you can do the little things that you can control, which takes me back to being intentional about what you do. No one intends to drop passes. No one intends to miss tackles, but you got to be intentional about every effort you put in.
Mm-hmm. And Carl mentioning Bill Parcells, he's in the Hall of Fame, in case you didn't know.
Yes, he is. Yeah. Dottino reminded everybody.
Yeah, Dottino, Lance Meadow, one-on-one. We're expecting fireworks again in this postgame. But, Carl, the urgency that, Logan Ryan was talking about this week in practice, the urgency that, Adoree Jackson saying, we got to take out the cartridge from the Nintendo and blow on it, reset, basically. I'd have to ask, shouldn't there have been a sense of urgency out of the gate here from the New York Giants?
Yeah. And again, like I said, I don't think they intended to be where they are, but now that you are, you can't stay here, or else, you're 12 more games into the season. It's tough. So yeah, do whatever you need to do. Shake the cartridge, bang the cartridge, blow in it, reset it, but come out and play good football, and you give yourself a chance to win. Every team has its weaknesses. Every team has its strengths. And, the goal of any NFL coach is to play to your strengths and cover, and try to hide your weaknesses. The Giants have that too. The Rams have it. How does the Giants go about exploiting the weaknesses of the Rams? How can they cover up some of their weaknesses? Kadarius Toney is a guy who can cover up some weaknesses of your offensive line, right? Because he's a guy that you can get the ball out of your hands quickly and just watch him do what he does. And that sets up so many other counter actions once he does that.
Carl, schematically, defensively, besides the tackling, what has changed here with Graham? Execution, where we've seen, blown coverages, miscommunications in the secondary, maybe a safety not being in the exact spot that they were a year ago. He's an unbelievable defensive coordinator. We know that. But have you seen anything schematically differently watching the film, being there, seeing this team day in and day out, as compared to where this defense was a year ago?
To be honest with you, it's hard to say schematically what's wrong. When you miss so many tackles, you don't know if it's scheme. Like missed tackles are human error. Right. So that's not scheme. There's no scheme that can get you out of a butt whipping up front. Right. So if things were to happen up at the front, do we know they would have gone bad in the defensive backfield? See, that's the thing that kind of, that I've been critical of Patrick's scheme twice this year, the Washington game, and then the Atlanta game, at the end of that game and at the end of the Washington game. So I know he's made some adjustments since then, but I don't know if there's a construct failure of what they do. I think they have the same principles. I don't know, maybe he has to simplify it a little bit, but it really comes down to executing the fundamental stuff that players can control.
All right, the defensive line, Carl, last year, I know you were, and you tweeted about, a huge fan of Dalvin Tomlinson and what he was doing up front. We saw him leave via free agency. We've seen this defensive line, Leonard Williams, his impact is not as great as it was a year ago. How much does this defensive line miss Tomlinson?
They miss more tackles than they miss Tomlinson.
Okay.
And that's no disrespect to Dalvin. He's gone. But the way I look at it, the Giants had the two top defensive tackles in free agency. They couldn't keep both, but they landed in retaining Leonard Williams. They landed the top defensive tackle in free agency. They were 1 and 1A, right? I thought with Leonard Williams' ability to rush the passer better than Dalvin would give them a little something extra. And then you have Dexter Lawrence, who is big, he's physical, he's athletic, not a soft kid. So Dalvin, they weren't going to keep one of the two of the guys. The guys that they have to have more impact. And that is, again, to my point, play like they pay, right? You're a top free agent talent that they retained. The expectation is to be that top defensive tackle. That's the expectation. Dexter Lawrence is a top defensive tackle. Be that top defensive tackle if you want them to pay you. But right now, they are not, on a consistent basis, impacting the game. Their outside edge guys are not impacting the game. And it's all complimentary football. I'm not piling on per se, but I'm just making the same observation many other people do. And I think I have a pretty educated eye.
No doubt.
Comes to this stuff.
I think so.
Yes.
But it's time now. If you need to blow in the cartridge, like Logan Ryan said, but you've got to impact game. Your best players have to impact games. Your role players, they have to do their jobs too. A guy like Carter, Zimenez, Ojulari, the sacks are fine. But when you realize how you get your sacks, it's because you were able to do something on first or second down to create a negative play so that you can rush the passer.
Right.
So it's all complementary, and they have to be better at that. Or else this is going to be a continuous conversation we have.
Carl, we got to get to your keys to the game, brought to you by your local Kia dealers, Kia, movement that inspires. But instead of just asking you for just a generic key to the game, can I ask you a specific key for Daniel Jones if he indeed is going to play in this game, and it looks like he is, what's the key for Jones coming off of that concussion that he suffered against Dallas?
Getting the ball out of his hands. And don't be afraid of turnovers, but make good decisions with it and don't play scared.
All
right, Carl. Pathway, there's always a path for the Giants. You mentioned for any team in any game for a victory. Do you envision this game in the second half, Giants and Rams being a close one?
I can see that. They've got to account for Aaron Donald. But then on the other side of the ball, they've got really good receivers. But the Giants safeties have to be able to take those deep crossing routes. Every week they're hitting something deep. Deshaun Jackson or Cooper Kupp, is it?
Yep. Cooper Kupp, Woods.
Running those deep crossing routes or deep in cuts, they've got to be able to take those away and make them play a little differently. They got a back who can run and catch. Limit the big play, and I think the Giants will have their opportunities.